everyone.
All right. So in the next 25 minutes, we're taking a closer look at Apple's new IOSMAC platform, better known under the leaked codename Marzipan. You'll learn about the history, the current status, the timeline, and of course, we're also going to play around with it. And we are not just doing a Hello World. We want to take a full-blown iOS app and convert it to the Mac. This is an app with over 1 million lines of code, and it contains C, C++, Objective-C, and of course, Swift. So yeah, I'm Peter Steinberger. I'm StyPete on Twitter. And I work at this company with the weird name. We run all the platforms. We do everything that's kind of related to PDF. And you probably have at least one copy on your phone. One of the most prominent apps is Dropbox, who uses us. But let's talk about Marzipan. So what is Marzipan? Marzipan is Apple's new iOS application layer for the Mac. It runs apps that are written in UIKIT and most of the UI-related frameworks. And it transforms them so it works seamlessly on the Mac. And notice you can already do that, and you're doing this for years. You were already running your iOS apps in the simulator. But Marzipan really is an evolution of that. It's a much deeper integration. It includes support for the menu bar, the toolbar, drag and drop, even focus rings. This also means that while it's probably quite easy to port your iOS app to the Mac, you shouldn't just do that. You will have to spend a little more work to make it a good citizen. And we'll look at that a little bit as well. But let's do some history first, because this has been done before. Who knows this app? Probably everybody, right? Instagram. But if you look a little bit closer at this, you'll see that something is wrong. This is, first of all, Instagram doesn't have an iPad app, and it's also running on Windows. But it's looking like an iOS app. How is that even possible? So Facebook purchased a company that's called OS Matter in 2013. It was a stealth startup, and they basically rewrote all of iOS. So they rewrote UIKit, they rewrote all the frameworks, so that you can port an existing app and then run it somewhere else, like on Android or in Windows. And Facebook's actually using that. It's debatable if it's a good idea. But this is one solution. Unfortunately, this is not open source, and it's not really something that we can use. Another solution is something that Microsoft built. So this is DJ. It's a popular app for playing music in clubs. And it's by Algorithm. And they started out on an iPad, and eventually they wanted to bring it to Windows. And they used Microsoft's Project Islandwood to port that. And it's also called Win Objective-C. And porting Objective-C, the language, isn't really hard. Like, there's open source runtime, Clanger support. It doesn't do Swift yet, but it would not be really hard to add. The challenges really are all the frameworks, CoGraphics, Foundation, and you want the real Foundation, not the open source one. And of course, UIKit. And while Microsoft is doing an admirable job of like porting a lot of things over, if you use that, it's not an easy ride. You will run into a lot of bugs and a lot of things that are not implemented, and it only works on Windows. So it's also not really something that we want to use. Now, there's been another project that's a little older, and it's called the Chameleon project. So Twitterific, one of the first Twitter client, they wanted to share code between iOS and the Mac. And what they did is they started to rewrite UIKit back in the days. And they succeeded for a while, and then they figured out that it's a lot of effort for probably not that many gains. So they eventually abandoned the project, and it's kind of like a state of iOS 3.2. So it's not that much fun to use. Back to Marzipan. So in the last few minutes of the Apple WWDC keynote, not the developer keynote, but the actual keynote that everybody watches, they dedicated time to talk about Marzipan. And they started with this sentence, are you merging iOS and macOS? And then what happened next quickly became a meme. You have this smoking no, that you've probably seen at Twitter everywhere. But really, it's more like a kinda, because they're putting a lot of effort into it. It's not just UIKit and we compile it. It's UIKit and we modify it so it can do mouse input. It can do, has an app window Chrome. It does window resizing. It has scroll bars. It has copy paste. It has drag and drop. This is a lot more effort than just like porting over the code. And we're now in phase 1. So Apple says, this is phase 1. We give you 4 new apps: news, stocks, voice memos, and home. And they are now shipped as part of Mojave. And you're not supposed to like look at anything else. Phase 1 is just for Apple, and the public preview should come at the next WWDC in 2019. If you look a little bit at the timeline, actually, the first rumors on that already started in 2017, and Mark Gurman from Bloomberg wrote first about this secret new project that's called Marzipan. And back in the days, like, it was like wildly discussed, and everybody was like, no, Apple's not going to do that. Like, it's crazy. This is like, was it wildly discussed? And then like a lot of people were like speechless when Apple actually announced it at WWDC as a sneak peek. And the best part was, while the conference was still going, people had already cracked it. So the first project, not the first one, but one of the first ones was like Marzipan Platter by Michael Thomas, which allowed you to run an app on the Mac using this new Marzipan technology. And then 2 weeks later, Stephen wrote Marzipanify, which is an evolution of that, and then it makes it much easier. And then a few weeks later, Apple did major changes to the platform in beta 3. But since then, things have been more or less stable, and you can expect a release pretty soon. Right, so a few fun facts about Marzipan. It actually reduces the scale factor. So this is not a one-to-one scape. They set it at 0.77, which means all your buttons get a little bit smaller, mostly because you have a mouse and you have a more precise device to like click, and you don't need that large of a click target. And it feels a little more at home on the Mac if you set it to a smaller scale. It's also either UIKit or APPKIT. You can't mix it. In fact, you can, but it's a really bad idea. And I also learned a new word. People were talking about the Marzipandemic, the spread of the dreaded single window UI, odd UI originally from iOS apps that come to the Mac. But really, this started way before Marzipan, and we can expect multi-window support on Marzipan, especially for like an app like PDF Viewer, when you have multiple documents. That will make sense, and I'm sure they will add support for that before the public release. And yes, some UI paradigms are a little bit weird. So you might need a little bit of work to make that UI to feel not completely alien on the Mac. And of course, because somebody had to do it, somebody ported React Native to macOS and gave it an amazing name, Marzipans. And they also state that it's reasonably good. So I just thought this is hilarious. Why do you want to look at it now? We're still about a year away from actually being able to officially build IOSMAC apps, and even that could be further delayed if Apple says so. But it probably isn't, because it's already pretty good. And it's close enough of a timeline that it makes sense to think about it, and it's really fun to explore. And especially because Apple made it so hard to try, it's just like even more fun to mess with it. So what do you do when you explore how a new platform works? You just look at the app, right? You know that there are 4 new apps that use the technology, so just look at voice memos. And the first thing people did is use OTool. And OTool is a small tool actually by Apple that will list you all the frameworks that this binary loads. So every binary needs all the frameworks, like AppKit, UIKit. And with OTool, you can see the list. And actually, I had to like trim it down because it's actually a little bit more, and you couldn't read it anymore. But you see that the important ones are there's UIKit and there's frontboard services. And a little history. So on iOS, up until including iOS 6, there was Springboard. And then eventually, Apple changed it to be split up into backboard and frontboard. And backboard does all the event handling. For example, when you have a WK web view and your user enters a password, your app shouldn't be able to get these events. So backboard routes these events process agnostic into your WK web view, and you will not even see them. And frontboard is responsible for doing all the view management, and they're actually called scenes. So when you go into the tab, into the window manager, that's all frontboard. And you see that there's a lot of familiar things that you've probably seen before, like application launch events. And interestingly, when you start the voice memo app, of course, it starts voice memos.app. That's expected. And then it starts a daemon. And that's also like kind of expected because voice memo does voice recording, and it should work in the background. So it kind of makes sense to like put that functionality in a daemon. That's the same way to do it on iOS. It's the same app. It's a little more interesting because then UIKITSYSTEM.app spins up. And UIKITSYSTEM is kind of the springboard on the Mac. Just that there are no icons that you can tap. It's invisible. But it does all the state management and app handling the same way, a very similar way that it does on your iPhone. And then there is another app, which is called the UIKIT host app. And is that playing already? No, here. And it's interesting. So actually, you start it, and you see two apps. And you see that this app is working, and we can use LLDB to pause, and that may kill the voice memo binary. And that means like this thing in the middle, like the main app doesn't get any commands anymore, but the window frame still works. And on the other hand, you can do the same with the UIKIT host app, and that means everything freezes because UIKIT host app is actually the window frame and a layer that then shows the app inside. So it's actually two processes merged into one. And it's also actually not called UIKIT host app. In the activity monitor, it shows up at voice memos twice because Apple is lying to you. We can confirm that this is indeed the real deal. If you try to start it directly, then we'll tell you, don't start it directly. You shouldn't do that. And I'm responsible for IOSMAC. So this is really the real deal. If we use OTool again, you see that it links to UIKIT, backboard, frontboard. This is everything we guessed for. And it's interesting that they also use Swift, the last one on the list, which actually expands to Verilon listed. This is a good sign. Apple is like starting more and more using Swift internally as well, even for very low-level things like that. So that means like as ABI stability is on the horizon, this is becoming more of a thing. The plist is also very similar structure, just that this process runs on demand, while on your phone it runs all the time, because without Springboard, your phone is just a brick. There's also a few interesting entitlements like this allow to wrap process that are interesting details. But you can read more on the technical side. Like I don't have that much time. So we want to build a Mac app, right? That's why we are here. And a quick disclaimer that things will break. Releasing Marzipan apps is tricky. Like I have a README with a 6-step process to start the app. Make backups. Maybe don't be like me and use your main machine to do it. Disabling security is a bad idea, and I have no idea what I'm doing either. So say that. You start by booting your Mac into recovery mode with Command R. And then you type in the CSR util disable. You have to actually disable the Apple system integrity protection. And then you have to add a new build argument, which is called AMFI get out of my way. That's actually that's an Apple-supported build argument. And AMFI is the Apple mobile file integrity. So this is sandboxing. So you're disabling security and sandboxing. So it's like YOLO land, basically like macOS was 5 years ago. So it's actually not that bad, you know? And we need this because for apps to run on the IOSMAC platform, they need this magic entitlement called Apple Private IOSMAC. And if you don't disable security, the system will kill the app before it has a chance to run. Oh yeah, and because nothing's ever easy, virtual machines don't work. Why? Because IOSMAC apps really need GPU acceleration. And there's no VMs yet available that would give you a metal-based GPU accelerator. Maybe eventually VMware Parallels builds one, but so far you're kind of out of luck. So use a machine, use the real thing. One of the first project that got me going was Marzipan Platter. It was a very approachable solution because it integrated into Xcode, and you could like basically get going right away. It shipped this like a version of UIKIT, and that was like rewritten. It's like a bunch of magic. Had a lot of problems, but it got me somewhere. And it even like I was part of this 9 to 5 Mac article where I showed what I did to our viewer, and you see that it's already pretty damn good for. That was running on the first beta version of Mojave. The video goes on a while, but you can watch it later. And then now we're getting even into more speed because everything I did was like wrong back then, so you shouldn't look too closely. But with Marzipan Platter, I basically like ported everything over. I had to do a lot of header mangling, and eventually I got it to run, and it crashed. And it crashed because it didn't find a method named NSWidgetType on UI label, and it's like, what? This shouldn't be together at all. Like in the stack trace, it said something like NSAqua user interface theme. Like, it doesn't make sense at all. This shouldn't be UIKit. This is like something from AppKit that's like interfering, and it's weird. And I Googled, and you only found one rater from 2015. It's like not useful at all. So I thought, like, what the heck? I'll just add these frameworks, like just add a category. Return 0, it will be fine. And it crashed. It crashed somewhere else. So it was like I knew I made progress, and it crashed in CF dictionary in a key. So I figured maybe 0 is the key. Maybe 0 is not right. Let's return 1. And it crashed somewhere else. So like I moved to a different problem. It's like, yes, this is great. And it went on for hours. So if I say I have no idea what I'm doing, I meant it. And there was like other problems, like the visual formatting language was broken because UIKit and AppKit kind of both loaded auto layout, and it really didn't like that. So I just removed that part, and then like I had to uncomment some other parts. And again, you Google and you find like one result, and it's like an old rater. It's like all very frustrating, 2013. And you see that I made screenshots. So you know why the screenshots are so shitty? Because it didn't just crash. It crashed and the computer froze. because the Windows server was part of the stack trace. And if you like debug into the Windows server, there is no updates anymore. And then like everything just stops. And back then, I used a MacBook Air. So it was like an insanely slow process. It kind of drove me insane. So I just filmed this on my camera because I didn't have the patience to try to make a screenshot fast enough. There was another bug, which was like UISTACKVIEW has a feature since iOS 11 that does system spacing, and that for some reason also didn't work. Luckily, we still supported iOS 10, so I had a category. So I just YOLO'd it. And eventually it worked. Like it started, and I was like, wow, this is cool. This is awesome. This is the future. No, lesson learned. Do not mix UIKit and AppKit. It's not cool. Another way to do it is Marzipan hook from Mikhail Kalutzny. This is a cool approach because it piggybacks on Apple's own stock apps and injects code into them. It's kind of like a virus that enters your cells and then makes your cell do things that it's not supposed to do. So he wrote that this like the most crude way I've seen so far. It basically only uses KVC, sorry, because there are no UIKit headers at all, and it kind of works. Like you do that, and you start the app, and it's a different app, but it's not really a good approach for something that's bigger. For something that's a little bigger, Marzipanify is your best shot, and of course it's by Steven because he's a magician. It was a big shout out because he helped me to get everything up and running. And what Marzipanify does is a few things. Like for once, it adds Marzipan glue. You see that the pun continues. It adds a few methods that are just not there and should be there, so like you have a little bit of an easier time to get things to run. It patches the INFO.PLIST and adds all those magic things that should be there, including support for dark mode. So actually, you're able to like support dark mode on iOS apps through Mojave, even though we don't have a dark mode on iOS yet. It's weird. And it also rewrites the MACH header, so it actually changes the platform header to IOSMAC. It's its own platform. It adds this magic entitlement that I mentioned before. And yeah, it does a bunch of other things, but that's the most important thing. So let's get started. We want to like get going. There's 6 minutes left. So the first thing you need to do is change the deployment target to iOS 12. Trust me, if you don't do that, you will waste an insane amount of time tracking down weird issues. I didn't know I had to do that, so you know now. Then the next thing is like delete things. If things are deprecated, they're probably not there because it's a new platform. UI WebView, not there. As a Safari view controller, doesn't make any freaking sense. We're on the Mac. You should just open Safari. So this will not be there. I really hope it's not there. Then there is like CT telephone network info, which is really annoying because all the analytics apps, SDKs use that. So you probably have to get rid of Firebase. And there's the other things like the mail sheet. I mean, you don't have a mail sheet, just open mail. So that's probably not going to be there. OpenGLES is not there because Apple is all metal. And with the other things. And once all the obvious things are there, the non-obvious things will fail. So I started it after cleaning up everything, then it crashed and didn't find the UI markup text print formatter, which should be there since iOS 4.2, but for some reason isn't. Only Apple knows why. A few more things that are not there is like the whole feedback generation stuff. UI print info, photos is a problem. The document browser doesn't make any sense to be there. You have Finder, so it'll probably not be there. And then also like things like the iPhone 10 extensions, set needs update of home indicator auto hidden. That method is just missing. So I guess somebody branched away before that was merged, and the teams didn't talk. I don't know. I can only guess. But it's not there. So, and you also should automate things. So you have to like manually call Marzipanify. You have to copy things over. It's not really integrated into Xcode. It's a two-step process. So write a small bash script, then you'll have a much easier time. And very important, don't just start the app. Use LLDB and then start the app and then type run, because then you'll actually see what the problem is. And I didn't think about that in the beginning, and I always looked at crash reports, and sometimes they take half an hour to generate because it's a separate daemon. So there was a lot of pain that I could have avoided if I would only have been smart. OK, once you do all of that, then it will crash again. Because it'll not want to load Swift. Because you use Swift, so system copies over all the support libraries, but they are made for Mac and not for IOSMAC. But they're basically the same, but the system doesn't accept it, and Marzipanify doesn't rewrite them. So what I did instead was like, I'm like smart. I just used the ones, the IOSMAC ones from those other folder, and I copied them over. And it kind of worked. It just crashed all the time because it was a different ABI, and it was like subtle differences. So all my Swift code was very sad. Eventually, I figured out that there is this magic text file in system IO support dlib macOS whitelist that you can edit, and you can just add the folder path, and then it will actually load Swift. Yeah, and as I said, AppKit is no fun. So if you have anything in AppKit, your app will not run. If you run it with LLDB, your app will run, but everything will be sad. And it took me a very long time to understand that, for example, Photos framework on the Mac loads AppKit. So didn't find the solution to that one, so I just uncommented it and went on with my life. I also, like, instead of like adding all those responsive selector, I just used a category to like add the missing things, which is sometimes a little bit nicer. And then behold, PDF viewer for macOS runs. And it's like, it's pretty damn good. Like you have page curl. You have the whole sheets. They like look a little bit different, but it's close enough. You see this menu is actually a UI menu controller, but it looks more like a right-click menu. So they tried, but it's not great, but it's good enough. I didn't click at the font thing because that crashes. But I'm sure it's fixable, you know. And like all the other things work, like search works. You see that this search field has like this ring, that's the focus ring. So they did add quite a little bit of features, so the keyboard works better. So it's pretty damn good. But we're not done yet. We want to become a better Mac citizen. I still have 1 minute and 40 seconds left. Whew. So if you look at Home app, notice the difference. It actually has a toolbar with stuff in it. So let's add stuff to the toolbar. How do we do that? I don't know. But I know that Home app does it, so we can just disassemble it and look at it, right? Luckily, somebody else already did that. And I found a class dump with like something called Ho window toolbar controller. And that gave me enough idea that I have to look for UI window toolbar controller. It's probably somewhere in UIKIT. I found it in UIKIT core. So you can like dump the headers. You can like copy them out. You want to like have one file where you copy all the things that you need. Like it's basically 3 classes. And then I add it to the bridging header so I can use it from Swift. And I'm sorry for the horrible Swift, but I was in hacking mode. So this works, but of course, nothing's easy in life, so it actually doesn't work. Because the system doesn't find the classes, right? Because they're obviously not there. You're building for real iOS, and then you're converting it to IOSMAC. So those things are not there. But Apple solved that a while ago with weak linking. So we just have to either create a framework and weak link that, or just tell the compiler to weak link those two classes. And you can actually do that if you use other linker flags and just tell the system to do that. So I did that, and then the linker was happy, but the runtime wasn't happy, and we crashed again, because it's never that easy, right? So now the runtime complained that, well, you told me I should weak link this, and now it's not there. So we have to tell the runtime as well that, don't worry, it's weak. If it's not there, you'll be fine. And then it actually runs. And behold, I added a button. And when you click on that button, it gives you an alert view. Now it's a great Mac citizen, right? And I want to end with some acknowledgements. There's a few people that really helped me and are really supportive of that community. Steven, Michael, Adam, and Flas are like just a few of them. And there was no more space for the other people. For Flas especially has like an interesting talk that goes a little more into the technical details and into how you can also load reveal. And Adam has a really nice article that goes much more into the technical side if you really are curious. If you want to try PDF Viewer, it's available for iOS and Mac. iOS and Android. It's available for Mac soon, hopefully. If you want more craziness, you can follow me on Twitter, and let the madness begin.